I read the article Mass School Closures and the Politics of Race Value and Disposability in Philadelphia by two researchers named McWilliams and Kitzmiller. The researchers are both women who are white, which is interesting because they were investigating issues of anti-blackness in Philadelphia and the way that school closures were determined. We focused on two that had very similar test scores, growth rates, and looked pretty similar on paper, except for population was different. So at the time of the closure, Franklin High School was 97% Black, and Johnson High School was 51% Asian. And they ultimately determined that Franklin High School should be closed, but that Johnson High School should be kept open. And the authors argue that that's because of the enrollment of Black to Asian students in those high schools. In the discussion in the community regarding the school closures, the media put out a lot of stories about how Johnson High School was performing better. They had the ability to grow. It was a safe haven for Asian students. And the authors argue that this pushed the model minority myth as an excuse to keep the school open, whereas the Black school was closed. And the authors argue it's because it was a Black school and in a Black community. So the authors say that this form of anti-Blackness is something called slow violence, which they defined through a book written by Nixon in 2011 as a violence that occurs gradually and out of sight, a violence of delayed destruction that is dispersed across time and space, and attritional violence that is not typically viewed as violence at all. And they argue that the closures of these schools in these poor Black communities is destroying the community and the real hopes for future for these children. They did a lot of interviewing of parents, staff, students, and other stakeholders in the community. And despite the district saying that there was community input and that they offered those opportunities for community input, they said it was like a facade basically because they didn't actually take anything into account. And the school was closed regardless of what it meant to the community. The authors recommend that we need to move in more reparative directions when schools are faced with failure rates or the perceived need for closure, and that we as leaders need to focus on creating a system where all students have an equitable education regardless of their race or where they're born. Okay, my question to you guys is, as a leader, how would you address structural violence or institutional bias facilitated by your district? Thank you.